Hello everyone, thank you for listening to Dan Tony Sports. I am Dan Snyder. This week we're taking a small break, but we didn't want to leave you with nothing. We're going to run down our picks for the games. Everyone sent them to me. I'm just going to tell you what the game is, and then I'll tell you who picked what for each game. But first, we have our poem, like always, our pigskin poetry. As I ate my Chick-fil-A and waited for the Cowboys to play, I thought about the games this week. The Patriots won, but not by much. The Ravens look like they need a crutch, and the Browns' future still looks bleak. The Jets won. Let that sink in. The Broncos gave the Bills a win, and Cam Newton looks really bad. The Bengals almost beat the Pack. The Bears led a vicious attack, and the Redskins made the Raiders fans sad. This week was better than the first two. Some crazy chaos, a gift to you. The NFL is in full swing. This is what we like to see. Quality games like week 3. But what kind of chaos will next week bring? That was Football is Finally Good. That's what I titled it, because finally football is good. Alright, so, like I said, no one else is here. It's just me. So I'm going to read the game, tell you what everyone picked, and then we're going to do a fun fact like we do every week, and then we're going to be out. Short and sweet this week, all right? So the first game in college football is Miami versus Duke. Dan Beebe picked Miami. Tony picked Miami. Dan O'Shea picked Miami. Dan Snyder picked Duke. Dan Beebe picked, for the next game, Georgia versus Tennessee. Dan Beebe picked Georgia. Tony picked Georgia. Dan O'Shea picked Georgia. And I picked Georgia. The next game is Auburn versus Mississippi State. Dan Beebe picked Auburn. Tony picked Mississippi State. Dan O'Shea picked Auburn. And I picked Auburn. Number 4, Virginia Tech versus Clemson. Virginia Tech is what Dan Beebe picked. Tony picked Clemson. Dan O'Shea picked Clemson. And I picked Virginia Tech. The 5th college game and final college game is Colorado versus UCLA. Dan Beebe picked Colorado. Tony picked Colorado. Dan O'Shea picked Colorado. And to make it a clean 4 for 4, I as well picked Colorado. Shifting now to the NFL, we have Packers versus Bears. Dan Beebe picked the Packers. Tony picked the Packers. Dan O'Shea picked the Packers. And again, I picked the Packers. The 7th game we have is Steelers versus Ravens. Ravens put up just an awful show last week. Steelers didn't do much better, but at least they played well enough. So with that in mind, Dan Beebe has the Steelers. Tony has the Steelers. Dan O'Shea has the Steelers. And you guessed it, I picked the Steelers. The next game is Bengals versus Browns. Dan Beebe picked the Bengals. Tony picked the Bengals. Dan O'Shea picked the Bengals. And I picked the Browns. The 9th game, Lions versus Vikings. Dan Beebe picked the Lions. Tony picked the Vikings. Dan O'Shea has a weird caveat, and this is going to be difficult because I'm going to have to give him hell for this later. He said if the Vikings have Sam Bradford, he picks the Vikings. If they don't, he's going with the Lions. I'm inclined to just give him an L for doing that, but that's I guess that's fair. We'll allow it. And I picked the Lions. And the final game, we have the Cardinals versus the 49ers. Dan Beebe picked the Cardinals. Tony picked the 49ers. Dan O'Shea picked the Cardinals. And I picked the Cardinals. I don't want to brag necessarily, but every week I've won. This week I came in 6-4. The rest of the guys, I believe, went 3-7. But I won, so I got to pick this week's games. And I'm sure I'm going to win again this week. And you're probably going to hear me pick next week's games as well. All right. Now, I told you this is going to be a short and sweet episode. those are our picks. What we've got left is our This Week in Sports History. I think it's a really good one. So, on September 26th, 2004, Ed Whitlock became the first person over 70 years of age to complete a marathon in under 3 hours. He did it in 2 hours, 54 minutes, and 48 seconds at the Toronto Marathon. I can't even barely get out of my house in 2 hours, 48 minutes. So kudos to that 70-year-old guy. Just a couple of housekeeping, quote-unquote, housekeeping things that I want to mention. If you haven't already, go to Not a Clue podcast and listen to the episode I was on. It was hilarious. We had so much fun, and we barely beat the 3-hour mark. So if you have 3 hours that you want to dedicate to having a good time, having laughs, and hearing me argue with two guys that, you know, are very versed in sports as well, then definitely give that most recent episode a listen, and give all their episodes a listen. They're very fun to listen to. Of course, you can listen to any of our episodes as well on Spreaker. That's where you'll find Not a Clue Podcast. That's where you'll find Dan Tony. Funny how those two things mix there. You can also find us on Twitter at Dan Tony, on Facebook Dan Tony Sports, our blog dandantonysports.blogspot.com, and if you feel the need to email us, dandantonysports@gmail.com. All right. Thank you for being such a patient audience. Next week, we will be back. Like I said, it's just a short break. We will be back next week. Thank you. Have a great night.